The day the storm broke started like any other. I was at my desk sifting through emails when I got another summons to HR. This time, the message felt heavier. Final. My attorney had already filed the formal complaint a week earlier, so I knew this meeting wouldn't be routine. I walked into the same glass-walled conference room, my heels clicking against the floor like a countdown. My supervisor sat stiffly, eyes darting between me and a stack of papers in front of him. The HR manager was there, but this time she wasn't alone. An unfamiliar man in a dark suit sat beside her. I recognized him instantly as someone from corporate legal. They started with polite formalities, the kind that try to hide the tension in the air. Then the HR manager leaned forward and said, "We've reviewed your recent concerns and the formal complaint you filed. While we respect all employees' right to personal expression, we also must uphold the standards that represent our brand." Image 4. Her words were a carefully woven net, polite enough to sound reasonable, but strong enough to entangle anyone not paying attention. I looked her in the eye and said, "Your standards are not neutral. They target certain people, certain cultures, certain identities. You've asked me to change my hair, something as natural to me as the color of my skin, because it doesn't fit an image that was never made for people like me. That's discrimination." The corporate lawyer cleared his throat. "We don't believe our request was discriminatory. It was merely what?" I cut in. "Merely a way to tell me I can stay here only if I look less like myself. Merely a reminder that I have to conform to a Eurocentric standard of beauty to be considered professional. You can call it policy, I call it what it is." The room went silent. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, copies of my documented notes, the company's dress code policy, and examples of other employees with different hairstyles who had never been questioned. I slid it across the table toward them. "You might think this is just about hair, but it's not. It's about dignity. It's about equity. And if you think I'm going to walk away quietly, you're mistaken." The lawyer glanced at the HR manager. My supervisor stared at his hands. There was a long pause, the kind that feels like a held breath. Then the lawyer spoke again, his voice measured. "We will need to confer internally and follow up." I left that meeting with my head high. My attorney advised patience, warning me that cases like this can be drawn out, that companies rarely admit wrongdoing outright. But I wasn't in it for an apology in a conference room. I was in it for the principle. Weeks turned into months. There were emails, letters, and mediation sessions. There were days when I felt the weight of it pressing on me, the uncertainty gnawing at my resolve. But every time I considered giving in, I remembered that quiet nod from my colleague in accounting, the stories from others who had been told the same thing in different words. I was carrying all of us in this fight. And then, one Friday afternoon, the call came. The company had agreed to a settlement, compensation for the retaliation I'd endured, and more importantly, a commitment to revise their dress code policy to explicitly protect natural hairstyles. They would also be implementing diversity training with an outside consultant. When I hung up, I didn't feel triumph in the way I'd imagined. Instead, I felt something deeper: relief, pride, and a quiet kind of victory. I hadn't just stood up for myself. I'd helped make it a little easier for the next person who walked through those office doors wearing their hair exactly as it grew from their head. On my last day at the company, I wore my curls bigger than ever. I walked out of that building into the afternoon sun, the light catching every coil, every strand, every piece of history that my hair carried. People on the street turned to look, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't wonder what they saw. I knew. They saw a woman who refused to shrink, a woman who knew her worth, a woman whose hair, just like her spirit, was unapologetically free. And that, I thought as I stepped into the bright open air, was the most professional thing of all.